Welcome to the Newcomers Podcast, people, where I explore what it means to be an immigrant, immigrants like myself. Today, I am talking with Imole Ashogbon. That his name is a mouthful. But the thing here is, Imole has been in HR he's been kind of like 8 years now, and he's been doing HR, which means that he's one of those people who have the privilege. It's a privilege of being at the front of, our struggles with talent as a country. And so we're talking about a couple of things. We talk about how Canada's productivity gap isn't a talent issue, it's a systems issue. And the other thing I think we talk about, which I found really, really interesting and equally important, is yes, the immigrant needs to culturally integrate. I agree. But the business needs to also do, it's not cultural integration from the point of the business is not a nice to have. It's important because one, the immigrant is a customer. And so as a business, you need to do cultural integration. And then two is that you're also going to hire the immigrant. And if you don't do that, then you have managers who don't even understand how to manage diverse teams. And then you have people who are frustrated. But yeah, let's get to it. One big thing about the conversation, the immigration conversation, the past 18 months, and I think with all that's happening in the US has kind of made sure that it just hasn't gone away, is you get the sense that you talk to some people and we feel as if immigration is a rescue mission. Like we are rescuing certain people from wars and stuff. And I agree. I'm like we said on the pre-show, there are some immigration programs that are, rescue missions. But Canada's predominant path of people who come in here are the express entry, the economic class, so in the end it's a competitive talent strategy for us, but it just feels like with the narrative that comes out from the government is not that way. So
Yeah,
what do you think?
that's an interesting aspect, and thank you so much again for having me. I'll say that sometimes Canada treats immigration like is a numbers game, but for me, I think it's a national talent strategy. And sometimes Canada really we focus on the quantity of newcomers, not the quality of integration. Think about it: integration, placement, and retention. That is a critical aspect of any organization, any country's solid labor force, which of course directly impacts your nation's productivity and your GDP. So think about it this way: immigrants make up 23% of Canada's population. Many are not, but many are not working in the field they are trained for, right? You find that over 45% of recent immigrants, they have university degrees, but they are working in jobs that do not require a post-secondary education. So we are letting or helping immigrants by letting them in, but the real question we need to ask is how well are we helping the country by fully using the people we bring in to the value Canada really needs? So it's not a rescue mission at all. It is a strategic gap that first world nations are using, for value realization, if I can put it that way. You need people. You need the right people, right? So Canada is not an aid. That's Canada. Immigration is not an aid, it's an investment. You just need to position it right and see it right. That's why this topic is exciting for me, yet disheartening for me when you look at the realities of ground.
Yeah.
So my submission is we are not helping immigrants by letting them in. Like you rightly said, there's a portion of immigrants that comes in and it's really help. It's you're going there to really help them out of a situation, but that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the rich strategy Canada is using to attract top minds. Canada is so strategic, well-able young people at prime age with the right education, right financial means. That's what Canada is attracting. And yet, there's a lot of displacement. Let me follow your lead in this. but it's not in any
No,
way
no,
rescue
just
mission.
like it's really like it's a thing between me and you here. Like it's us having a conversation about this, and you're right. I think what I find frustrating, I was very careful with the adjectives I use to describe things these days. But what I find very frustrating is the narratives that come out and that define how people see immigrants allow us to
Hmm.
now say things where the immigrant becomes blamed for everything. Oh, housing is a problem. It's the
Yeah.
immigrant. The hospitals are full. It's the immigrant.
Hmm.
The system is collapsing. It's the
Hmm.
immigrant.
Because of immigrants.
And I'm like, there are two things in there. There's one which is basically something you said about are we if when you look at it from a numbers game, then it's so easy for the conversation to go down this way because it's a numbers conversation. Oh, we brought
Yeah.
in 500,000 people,
Mm-hmm.
and in all this we are saying, I'm also cognizant of the fact that there's the part about these people are human beings, like full human beings who have full stories. So
Yes.
there's all that dehumanizing conversation that comes with when you look at it from a very economic lens, where you now make it very dehumanizing, you know. And I think the thing, like, you're in HR, and so you deal a lot with people and stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe the question here is, how does one even start to pitch? Start to
Hmm.
pitch and start to say things like, so you can close that gap between, oh, numbers versus, oh, these people are not just numbers, but they're like, it's quality.
Okay.
It's people who bring value to the system, who
Yeah.
people who bring color to the country. That kind of thing. I think that's the thing, like, which sometimes I don't have the answer to it at all. Like, it's
Okay, beautiful. And Doze, you're doing a good job by really steering this conversation. And I'm going to answer your question this way. So I get those complaints. And I've been in Canada for over 8 years now. So I can track some of those metrics, right? I can track it very well. When I came into Calgary, you could buy a whole 4-bedroom house for $480,000. There are some metrics that you can count, but this is number one issue I see. There's a misalignment between policy and practice, right?
mm,
So when you think about immigration, employment, and economic strategies, they are created in silos. That's what I see, right? So the bridge between entry, employment, and the elevation that these talents bring in is broken, right? And that's where I think some political parties, and that's why I say some people have the problem. There has to be alignment between your immigration strategy, which is a strategy for Canada, the employment dynamics. So when I talk about employment, let me take it deeper for you. There's a lot of gatekeeping in hiring. Canadian experience, the unspoken bias. Come on, the excessive credential. Let me use the word fetishism, if there's any word like that, that keeps a lot of skilled immigrants out of the meaningful work. So I know that sometimes there's a fear of the unknown when you are dealing with the unknown, new color, new people, new. But Canada as a country thrives on multiculturalism, diversity. And if you must truly thrive, you have to take away those gatekeeping elements that most times they're embedded in ignorance. I say that very carefully because I've worked with a lot of Canadians that they are globally exposed. They're exposed in their mind. They don't gatekeep. They understand that your competences are global. It's not defined by the color of your skin. If you're able to do surgery on a human being in Bangladesh, in Timbuktu, in Nigeria or Ghana, the same human anatomy here, right? I'm not saying there shouldn't be certain processes in place to ensure that the standards are met. That's important. But HR in Ghana is the same thing as HR here. How to hire, how to train, how to elevate, how to make the organization win in marketplace. Same global competences. What is different is the culture and the context. And so when you're gatekeeping in your hiring process, you're losing out, right? The other factor I find that makes this narrative really messed up sometimes is that risk averse culture. So as an HR professional, I've seen that organizations prefer safe hires over smart hires. And I get it. You're looking for culture fit. What this affects is that it affects productivity, it affects innovation and inclusion. when I'm speaking to leaders, I speak numbers. Not these are not emotional tales. When you bring in solid minds from other countries or other space, they innovate. But what you need to do as an organization is to have systems, structures, and framework in place to assimilate those people. You're not just going to put all the burden on these new people coming. I
Yeah.
know that there could be a cultural gap, but that is that is that is a key issue. So these are the things affecting the narrative. Let me give you another point. It's what I call leadership gap. So you find too few managers are equipped to lead across differences or different.
Yeah.
Very few managers are equipped. So diversity without inclusion becomes a dysfunction. Either you like it or yes, Canada as a country is rich, is enriched. There's a lot of mileage to cover, but immigrants play a significant strategic role. Best minds. And even when you look at best countries in the world, immigrants play a significant role too.
Yeah.
And Canada is following suit. So, but you still have all these gatekeeping elements. And those are the things affecting the narratives, right? Once you can take away those silos, those misalignments, dude, there's going to be a significant shift. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but those silos, once it's taken away, immigration, employment, and economic strategies, when there's an alignment, and then you cascade it down to organizations and leaders, that framework works. It's worked in some great countries. It's going to work in Canada.
Yeah. You remind me of something Daniel Bernhard, the CEO of ICC, says. Like, I never forget, I interviewed him last year, and he said something about how the Ministry of Immigration should be seen as Canada's HR department.
That's a powerful one.
Yeah, they should be Canada's HR department, because every single point they're saying to themselves, what do we need as a country? And who are the people we're asking to come in? Like what? So once we decide what we need, then you use that to design the job description and the interview process. And I'm using that as a proxy for the immigration process. And so once you do all that, then the second part, and then the second person, Shamira, calls it like the fact that Shamira Madhani of West, she says, whether what we must have is, and you just said it right now, is between government, provincial, employment, immigration, everybody needs to work together. We can't have all these things where Nova Scotia says they need X, federal says no, that's not in. Like, just having all that,
Silent.
and then here's the saddest thing for me.
Yeah.
And then the human in the loop becomes a file that just suffers, and it's just a file that because when we are having all these conversations, I always tell people that one of the things I struggle with is the fact that the immigration conversation can become so impersonal, because you just say is that we're bringing in 500,000 express entry candidate, or we're bringing in 500,000 PRs into Canada.
Yeah.
Look, I get it. 500,000 PRs. And I get the fact that because we need to say it out in public, we'll say that number. But please remember, that's 500,000 individuals who, if you mishandle that process,
500,000 generations. 500,000.
Yes.
The kids, the dependents are not counted to. 500,000 times X of people who could have done different things in their country. And somebody can pause and say, so why are they coming? Either you like it or yes, organizations, countries, right, knows that talent, or knows that the labor force is a critical factor, right, in your national talent strategy. It's a critical factor in the country's GDP. It's a critical factor even being a frontline leader when it comes to global economics. Look at what immigrants have done in the US, right? I mean, look at the milestones. There's just so much that we must understand that it's you're not so doing. How many businesses have really expanded and exploded because of the influx of immigrants? You can't actually put a number to that, right? Do you know the billions of dollars that revolves around? Do you even know how much Canada makes also from bringing all of these immigrants?
I mean, they pay a fee, by the way.
Yes, there's a fee to it. I understand that the taxpayer dollars goes into certain things, but at the same time, I guess the I guess one of the narratives here is to understand that immigration must be seen as an executive talent acquisition strategy for the nation. Do you understand? So I say Canada must invest in post-arrival systems. You understand? If it must work, the post-arrival system must break down barriers around credential recognitions, employer incentives. So I presented to management a few years ago in my organization. I was talking about some of the things I was doing in the HR community I lead and why we started it and all of that. And I talked about some of the challenges. A lot of people didn't know about this. They were wowed. And they asked me a question. They said, so Imole, having been on both sides as an HR professional who struggled, I applied over 600 times before I got my first HR job, and somebody who's now working in a multinational who has recruited a lot of people who have seen it. What's my perspective? This Canadian experience, is it real and all of that? They asked me that question, and I said, first and foremost, it's not to be candid, it's not. It's a gatekeeping strategy. I am very well aware of the cultural difference,
Yeah.
right? I'm very well aware the nuances in the Canadian system, how Canadians do things, how things are expected to be done, the expectations, the politeness, the thank you, the non, you must be non aggressive, you are not confrontational. All of those things are excellent and beautiful. But when you're bringing in talent who have come to do the job and can do the job, can be instrumental in taking your organization to the next level, there has to be systems in place. There has to be training in place. There has to, so that you're accommodating these people, you're helping them integrate. They have their responsibility, no doubt. I tell immigrants, you're coming from the known to the unknown. You must be ready to unlearn, relearn, and position yourself for excellent opportunity. You must be ready to understand how things work. You can't talk about CV again. We use resume here. You must be ready to, you must be ready to manage your emotions and not say you want to give them a piece of your heart. You must be ready to understand how feedback is given here. It's not pushy. You must know all of those nuances that going for coffee and small chats is part of your engagement in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
You must be ready to speak to the core of the issue, tailor your resume. All of those are important. But the truth about it is the organization also who is inclusive, who wants business expansion and innovation, must also be a catalyst, must also be a catalyst in this national revival. If I,
you know,
if I want to put it
I
that way.
love this. I love this honestly because the data is there actually. I mean, it was on Shamira's episode where she had this thing. I just pulled it up from RBC Economics, which says that Canadian businesses report losing $38 billion a year due to workforce shortages. And it kind of goes back to the thing where we talk about where we talked about earlier while we were planning for the show, which is from the immigrant's point of view. You're right. The immigrant needs to culturally integrate and do the work.
Hmm.
But for the business also, it's a business capability need. Like it's
Yes,
a
bro.
it's not a nice to have, or you're not helping the immigrant. It's actually a business need that I coach, I make sure, or I do the work that gets these people to culture integrate, because one, their customers.
Yes.
Their
Yes,
customers.
dude. Their customers bringing in the revenue. Their
So,
customers enabling business growth and expansion.
oh
Their
god.
customers, right population increases business.
Yes.
And Canada is so strategic that they not just in bringing educated immigrants, well-meaning immigrants, who some have come to make business investments here.
Yep.
But do you also realize, speaking in terms of the labor force or talent, do you realize that RBC Economics says that 43% of immigrants that's educated immigrants, they remain underemployed, even 5 years
Yeah.
plus after landing in Canada.
Yeah.
Do you understand? And more than two-thirds of Canada's population growth now comes from immigration. It's a primary fuel for economic growth,
You know
either you like it or yet.
that point about immigrants being underemployed.
Mm.
I'm curious. Is it a
Or
function?
underemployed.
Yeah, being underemployed. Is it a function of is it a function of just all the barriers, or is it a function of the fact that we have a huge productivity gap as a country, and so it means that we are
Ah,
not.
you've gone there.
So because sometimes you're underemployed because there's no work.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. So, as at last month, Canada's unemployment percent rate national is about 7%. So if 43% are underemployed
Underemployed.
and unemployment is 43, that simply means 7% simply means that 7 out of 10 people don't have a job. But 43% of immigrants who are trained, who are exposed, who have everything underemployed, you see there's a gap there. To your question, think about it this way. Canada's productivity gap is not because people are not capable. I know that for sure. It's because the system is not optimized to use what people bring. I see. I tell you that very straight. It's because of that. So think in let me do when I did a research some time ago, Canada's labor productivity grew by 0.6% annually from 2000 to 2019. Meanwhile, compared to the US, it grew by 1.8% over the same period. This data was from OECD. Go check it up in 2023. So the truth about it is Canada also ranks 20th out of 35 OECD countries in the labor productivity per hour worked, right? So what's the paradox here? 60% of working immigrants or working age immigrants, they hold a post degree. 60%. Stats Canada said so. Meanwhile, the Canadian average is about 52%. So I know that you come into a new land, Canada's immigrants come in educated, underutilized. I mean, yet is lack of innovation and innovative systems or leadership practices that is really gatekeeping this issue, that is making all these creative immigrants not work. So it's a systemic failure. I say that respectfully, right? And I'm sure somebody is listening now, like, who's this guy? Why you just say truth is, I am pro Canada. I love Canada.
Oh, I love this country.
Oh
Honestly,
God,
I
I
do.
love Canada. But I've gone through the most stress I've gone through in my life here in Canada. The most pressures I've gone through my life. So Canada comes with its burden, with its press, with its all of that. But at the same time, Canada is a beautiful country that has a lot of opportunities and a lot of great things. It's just critical that we we don't for instance, over reliance on credentials, right? You reject a lot of international education and experience. Say you don't have Canadian experience. What exactly is Canadian experience? This Canadian experience. This is just trust, right? And I get that inherently, but it should not be a gatekeeper. As long as you can assess the person's competences and ability to adapt into your cultural nuances. I know there's some work that needs to be done on part of people. You don't deny them or deny yourself of these talents of what they bring. And that's why I said earlier on, a lot of managers are not even equipped to navigate this, right? Even within the conversation level, not to talk about the training. You talked about fragmented provinces. Yes, that is that is a big issue, my brother. There's no unified strategy that aligns productivity. Think about it that way. From a productivity part, from an immigration part, or skills development, there's no integration. There's no that it's fragmented. How do you harness it? I've seen a lot of people coming through all of these programs. They move away from that province because there's nothing for them in that province, and they go to other provinces, right? And sometimes it's not doesn't mean that they're still maximized. So your question is it a productivity issue, right? Or a system? Is it a talent issue or a systems
Systems
failure?
issues.
Dude,
Yeah.
it's not a talent issue. There are a lot of talents in Canada. There are a lot of great talents in Canada. It's a system failure issue.
And like I think I feel like I've said this too much the past couple of days is that you can't out entrepreneur policy. And so you wonder if this is a function of is what are we doing as a country from a policy level to one, start these conversations, two, encourage or incentivize changes, and probably three, just break down all that interprovincial barriers because when I go around and I see the made in Canada thing all over the place, I love it. But I'm just like, that's just PR.
Hmm.
It's just PR. Made in Canada, made in Canada, made in Canada, but people still can't find jobs. But what is made in Canada? Like, it was made in Canada, yes, but if we're not doing the things we need to do, and then at some point, it's going to come reckoning, and we'll have to pay for it, whether we make it in Canada or not. Some in ways we don't like, and I don't know. It's just let me not rant. My last question for you basically is, just seeing all this, like, if you had to say, like, what are top three things you hope we could do as a country to sort of help to even start having the right conversations, what would they be?
Good question. First, thank you for doing this. As a trained HR professional, I don't have all the answers. I know how to ask the right questions. That's part of my training. But I think first and foremost, if I want to answer your question, I say if you want to fix the productivity gap, we need what we call a system overhaul. You understand? Not talent replacement. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you look at within organizations losing talent. Let's even forget about immigrants and all of that. You don't fix bringing more people. You fix what is making others leave,
Yeah.
right? And we're also seeing an exodus here in Canada.
Yeah.
So we need to, at a system level, I'll think systems now. At a systems level, we need to think about policy level solutions, right? Number one, think about national credential integration platforms. I know it's going to be difficult because Canada works, ESA comes to mind. Canada works by provincial at the most part, right? But one of the strategies is to create a unified digital credential recognition system across provinces. I know Ontario is really putting down on some of those barriers, working around that. Or some Abata events. I attended an events meeting early this year. They're also looking at that. But if you can create a unified digital credential recognition system across provinces and link it to a regulated profession, you fast track approvals for immigrants, right? Especially from countries, that have similar academic rigor. That's
Yeah.
important. Similar. I'm Nigerian. I know what we went through in the university, dude. So it's not a joke. So another thing I'll talk about is like SME innovation grants. Think about offering productivity linked subsidy to SMEs that invest in automations or digital tools or immigrant upskilling. I know some people are doing that, but think about how you can tie this to the labor force productivity per hour. You understand? So think about employment index and all those other things, but empower SMEs. That's a critical factor. Then that's at a policy level. Then I think of employer level solutions. So when I'm thinking of employer level solutions, I'm saying redesign job structure in your organization. Move away from fixed robots to agile work designs. Agile work designs will allow multi-skilled individuals to come in, grow, and contribute across teams. A lot of time we're just used to what we know, what we've been doing. Look about agile work designs that enables you to bring in solid talent, then train managers, upskill managers, not just the workers. Upskill manager. Think about manager readiness training for diverse teams. You understand? So that you're cutting all those barriers. You are increasing feedback loops. I know an immigrant's solid talent. In less than 3 months, she was frustrated. Literally, almost every week, she was reaching out to me. Solid talent brought from another organization. I reached out to her. I spoke to her last week, and she told me things are better. Let me tell you what happened. They brought in a new manager who was really touting her life, but what happened was that the system had a 360 feedback loop where they assessed the manager as well. And it was not a, what do you call it? A retaliatory system. You see, some of our HR systems, organization systems enable. And she was able to give an objective feedback, not afraid of backlash or this thing. And it changed everything. I was happy in my soul because the organization has systems where they can objectively assess and be true to themselves. They would have lost that talent, and so many things would have gone wrong. So within the organizational level, you want to put things, and then you want to measure outcomes, not just inputs. How are you focusing on the outcomes of this person? How are you empowering autonomy? How are you removing the bias skills? You know, I will also be remiss not to talk about the individual level, right? I always encourage immigrants, dude. You left the known to the unknown. You need to
Yeah.
up game your game. If there's
Yeah,
anything like
you should.
leverage your
Yeah.
portfolio,
Yeah.
right? Build cross-cultural competencies, awareness, and alliances. Don't just come. This is how I used to do it. This is what I know. Unlearn a whole lot of things
Yeah.
because there's a shared accountability. There's a shared responsibility. In that place, especially when it comes to cultural integration. I love this statement a lot, and I quoted it. I say it a lot of times. It's my quote. I said, "Your competencies are global. What is different in Canada is culture and context. So come in, learn it, right? And you would succeed, you would excel. That's what I know. Then the last recommendation I'll give, especially at the immigration as a strategy, right? I'll say Canada needs to build the infrastructure that will unlock the true ROI of the company. Sorry, I keep thinking about company of the
The
country.
country.
You know,
I mean,
so at the
the country is
policy
the company,
level,
by the way.
yeah, oh yes,
It's a company.
at the country level, create a national immigration or national immigrant silent strategy. You said so. So beyond these immigration quotas, build a 10-year pipeline. You understand? And tie these to sectors: energy, tech, health, construction, right? And work backward into the workforce development and retention strategy. So it's a national strategy. This is business needs. This is where we're going to. These are the people we need to get there. Start from within. Who do we have within? Then build a leadership acceleration program for immigrants. You understand? And you co-design this. You co-design this with the public sector. You co-design it with the private sector. You fast track hypos of immigrants into these leadership roles. Use data. You understand? Use mentorship system. Make sure there is not is colorblind, is balanced, right? And the last thing I'll say this: employers must rethink this concept of Canadian experience. It's a filter.
Yeah.
Treat international experience as a value add, not a liability. There are little bridges, build systems or structures to evaluate and tools to assess this and close that gap. You understand? Some big organizations in Canada, they are rebranding their internal talent pathways. That's a strategy also, right? And they are doing cross-sector collaboration on talent pools. That's a strategy. So, my brother, I'll say to you that there's so much this country has and
Yeah.
bringing and awesome, but productivity is not just about working harder in Canada, right? I think integration here is also not about fitting it, but more importantly is about using immigration to fill the gaps, and not just fill the gaps. System design, you know make it take Canada from this level to the next level with what Canada has already. The great minds already in Canada, the great blessing, the great many resources Canada have, including human capability, that Canada has from the immigration sector. Put all of these systems in place. In 10 years, you see Canada becomes number one country in the world. It is so possible.
I don't know about the one country 10 years though, because I mean we move pretty slow in a lot of things, but I hear you. Like I really hear you. Especially that part about I feel like one of the biggest parts of one of the things you said there was that part about, the national strategy, and then also just basically saying, let's even start even saying manager readiness for teams that are for diverse teams.
Yes.
Because it's a given right now that most teams will be diverse, and diverse doesn't have to be just they has a black person. The point is that Canada has a lot of immigrants from all over the world, so it
All
means
over
that
the world.
more often
Yes.
than not the cultural contexts are very different. But yeah. but yeah but yeah, thank you so much. Like, thanks for doing this with me. Like, thanks for talking. Thanks for allowing me rant, and thanks for just sharing this stuff with me. Please, thank you so much, Imole. Thank you. I really
Th-
appreciate that.
thank I thank you, Doze. Thank you for when we meet on the street of LinkedIn. It's I see your stuff. It's exciting, and I think it's courageous. It's bold, respectfully, some persons might not like this conversation, um, and some persons might see it as strategic. The I can speak for you at a level because I see what you do, and I speak for myself in the context of this conversation. For me, this is not in any way about pointing fingers. This is in a way about let's assess the situation
Yeah.
from our lens, from the data, and come up and palpitate and come up with possible frameworks and solutions. And so I'm
Yeah.
glad for you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad that you're having this conversation. And I'm glad for the many allies out there,
Yeah.
right? There are a lot of allies, people who they go beyond the mouths. They understand the power of immigrants, the power of diversity. They understand those things, and they are genuinely using it to their own good as well, to their own people. Because at the end of the day, it's so much of what is in it for me at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
think about what is in it for you as a business, what is in it for us as a country. It is always a value add. Just be strategic about it, right? And yeah, more beautiful days ahead. So again, thank you so much for having me.
All right, man. Imole is very passionate about stuff, and I love that. But I hope you enjoy the conversation. And he has a ton of really good suggestions for the government and for people who are very much involved in all this thing we're doing with immigration and all that. As always, thank you so much for getting to this point of the podcast. I really appreciate that. If you know someone who finds it useful, send to them. If you know someone who I should talk to, send them my way. Please like, share, subscribe on YouTube, Substack. Anywhere you get your podcast, you can find us there. Ciao. And make sure you sign up for the next one.